big time.
So how did you get into EBOO? Did it start with ozone therapy?
Yeah, so I've been working with ozone first just in the form of prolozone, so injections into joints and soft tissues since 2012, which that was part of my dad's regimen as well. But, you know, let me back up just a second. So my mother-in-law actually got diagnosed with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, which is a slow scarring of the lung tissue, for those of you who are not aware, basically until you get a lung transplant or die.
Yeah.
There's two medications that now that can slow the progression, but typically people from diagnosis until they either get the lung transplant or pass away is about somewhere between 3 and 7 years on average. My mother-in-law was one of 13. She actually had one brother pass away within like 2 years of his diagnosis, and then another sister who also had IPF, and she passed away within 2 or 3 years of her diagnosis. And then her mother also passed away of IPF. So very strong kind of predisposition to it. And so she got diagnosed, it's probably been 6.5 years ago now. And that was another like aha moment, right? Like the moment we got this diagnosis, she went from hiking to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, and then 6 months later could like barely walk, keeping up with her walking buddies. Got the diagnosis, and then it was like another aha. Okay, what's the universe doing here, right? So again, opened up the toolbox and just was like, what can I offer? And interestingly, stem cells were one of those things that I did on her, and did IV stem cells, and that just totally halted the progression, like 100%. She actually ended up getting a couple percentages better, not all better, but totally halted the progression.
Beautiful.
Now she's on the medication as well, but it's absolutely the stem cells. We have like CT scans to prove it. The unfortunate part is that her pulmonologists at Cedars-Sinai don't care what else she's doing, right? So it's like 6 years later, after she's had 3 family members die within 2 to 3 years of diagnosis, she's still doing totally status quo, right? After going down like this for the first 6 to 8 months, right? So it's just a sad critique of standard medicine that they won't open their mind. A lot of them won't open their minds, right? They want to do good, but they
getting
won't.
Better, and they're not interested in finding out how.
Why not ask questions? How?
Right. That's really sad.
So fast forward. So that was kind of a long-winded explanation. Fast forward to the beginning of the pandemic and that first month of it starting, when I think I didn't quite have a good grasp of what was really going on. I was like, okay, I got to get more tools in my toolbox for my mother-in-law. So, and I'd kind of heard about this ozone dialysis. I searched around. Nobody could like train me on it though, and show me how to do. So I ended up building my own machine. I thought it would take me like a month. It ended up taking me about 6 months, because it was like my first real mad scientist experience. My blood was on the walls, like all over. We ordered so many sets of tubings, and because there's a lot that goes into the engineering of an EBOO machine. Finally, again,
so can you first tell the listeners what is EBOO exactly?
Yeah, great question. So EBOO stands for extracorporeal blood oxygenation and ozonation. So a lot of people think of it as like a dialysis, and that's really just because we have blood coming out of one arm, going through this machine, and then coming back into the other arm, ideally. But it's not dialysis at all. It's really just, how do we get this huge surface area of our blood exposed to the oxygen ozone mixture? And when we say we're giving ozone to someone, it's actually usually only somewhere between 1% and 3% ozone. The other 97 to 99% is actually oxygen. So it's actually oxygen ozone mixture. And so in EBOO, extracorporeal, so outside of the body, blood oxygenation and ozonation. So there's this filter that depending on what filter we're talking about, it's about 1.5 to 3 square meters of filter paper. And our blood is literally running across 1.5 to 3 square meters of filter paper that has a bunch of little micro holes in it where oxygen ozone is on one side and it's permeating through those little holes into our blood. And so it's just this like continuous, we do it for about 45 to 60 minutes typically in someone. And so it's just this continuous low dose of oxygen and ozone being introduced into the blood of a person.
Is there any extra benefit of using the filter? I know the traditional, ozone therapy, the oxygen and ozone mixture is mixed directly with the blood. Is there a benefit to using a filter?
Yeah, really the main benefit is just this huge surface area. So where an EBOO session probably gives, depending on the exact settings and what other ozone therapy you're talking about, it gives, it's probably the equivalent of like 10 to 20 MAHs or major autohemotherapy, where a little bit of blood is drawn out, put into a bag, and then some ozone is injected into that bag and then drip back into the person. Phenomenal therapy, which I'd love to like mention that we're doing an MAH study that people are welcome to join if they're in Southern California. But again, it's like the EBOO is about 10 to 20 sessions worth of oxygen and ozone, right? And so it just tends to be a lot better. It's probably about 2 to 3 times more than a 10 pass for those of you who are maybe familiar with a 10 pass.
2 to 3 times more. That's a lot more.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And it's given more gently than a 10 pass. So 10 pass is a phenomenal therapy. I have nothing bad to say about 10 pass. It truly is a phenomenal therapy, but it gives the ozone at a much higher concentration. So it's harsher on the red blood cells, which some people can just have like a Herxheimer's reaction to. And so it can become it's kind of like a little too much of a good thing oftentimes, which can happen with any therapy, right? But it's like, where's that balancing act? And so that's part of the beauty of EBOO, is that people tend to tolerate it really, really well.
Okay. But you're actually connecting a person twice, right? One is a needle that takes the blood out. The other one's a needle that put the blood in. So do you think that, is there an issue for some people not being able to establish this kind of flow? Is that an issue at all?
It can be, but that has more to do with the experience of the nurse than anything. I mean, for someone who really who has horrible veins, this is probably not a good therapy to pursue, because you do need kind of moderate to larger gauge needles. But again, that usually has more to do with how good the nurse is. And sometimes it's an issue, but we've done somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 sessions of EBOO at this point, and we've probably turned away maybe like 5 because of that reason.
I see.
I mean, less than 10 for sure. So it does not tend to be a huge issue.